Today we're going to look at the real danger magicians faced in Europe during the medieval period, through the witch trials, and into the Enlightenment. For centuries, the greatest risk for magicians was not the physical danger of the tricks, but the social peril of persecution. My name's Ed, and here's some magic history. In medieval and early modern Europe, the boundary between entertainment and supernatural power did not exist in the minds of the public or the law. Clergy and magistrates often viewed conjuring not as a skill, but as sorcery. A coin vanish wasn't just a trick, it was potential evidence of a pact with the devil. Itinerant jugglers and conjurers lacked protection of guilds or noble patrons, and without social standing, they were easy targets for suspicion. Simple street feats like the cups and balls could be read as a diabolical sign during times of panic, turning applause into accusation. Appearance mattered more than intention. To the suspicious mind, a clever trick and a dark spell look exactly the same. It was not the intent of the heart that condemned a man, but the mystery of his hands. Social optics ruled medieval society. Looking like a conjurer or possessing secret knowledge was enough to trigger rumors. In cycles of panic, rational explanations were often drowned out by the terrified belief that deception equaled danger. In 1584, Reginald Scot wrote the book The Discovery of Witchcraft. He exposed magic as mere sleight of hand and mechanical trickery. He argued that those accused of witchcraft were often mentally ill, poor, or victims of deception themselves, not partners of the devil. King James, of the King James Bible, condemned Scott's skepticism as damnable and ordered his books burned. There is some controversy among historians whether or not any of the books were actually burned, whether or not book burnings were organized or just one-off, and the fact that we still have copies of it today shows that they obviously didn't get to all of them. King James' reply to Reginald Scott's Discovery of Witchcraft, Demonology, in 1597 affirmed the real danger of witches and demons, cementing the worldview that made illusion a capital offense. The broad wording of statutes like England's Witchcraft Act of 1563 and 1604 meant that performing enchantments for entertainment was legally indistinguishable from summoning demons. Then we also had the vagabondage laws, which affected the itinerant performers. They faced a double threat. Without a royal patent or noble patronage, traveling jugglers were often classified as vagabonds, so they were subject to arrest, whipping, and exile merely for their job. The panic was such that any man of strange habit or skill was liable to be seized by the mob before the law could even speak. During local panics and trials, itinerant performers were defenseless. The legal distinctions blurred, and mob justice often superseded the courts. Performers took a couple of different tacks. Some of them tried moral disclaimers, explicitly stating that their tricks were natural skill and not because of... They often performed in more private venues like a churchyard or within a wealthy patron's house, and they avoided pretty much any diabolic type themes, removing any black cats or skulls or any Latin from their act. Then we come to the Enlightenment. In the late 1600s, science started to come into its own, and magic started to be looked at more as a science as opposed to sorcery. As the clockwork universe took hold, audiences learned to interpret conjuring not as demonic power, but as a clever deception or mechanical ingenuity. As the Enlightenment dawned, magicians actively shed the cloak of supernatural, adopting the language of science, mechanics, and natural philosophy. Performers rebranded themselves as physicists or professors, often giving themselves monikers like Doctor or Professor so-and-so. And they started to frame their illusions as demonstrations of optical and mechanical principles rather than the dark arts. Most of the explanations were false, but it kept them out of jail. Complex apparatuses, hidden mirrors, and clockwork replaced spirits as the explanation for the impossible. The audience admired the ingenuity of the machine, and not the power of the spell. As the stigma of witchcraft faded, audience demanded higher stakes. The danger shifted from legal persecution to voluntary bodily harm. The bullet catch became the ultimate proof of courage. Underwater cells and straitjackets posed real drowning risks, and complex machinery introduced crushing and burning hazards. At least 12 magicians have died performing the bullet catch. The danger was no longer the stake, but the stage itself. What was then fear is now enlightenment, and what was once seen as witchcraft and sorcery is now seen as skill and ingenuity. And the threat moved from social persecution to actual physical risk. Danger came from the church, the mob, outside the law. A safe trick could lead to lethal accusation. But in the modern era, danger comes from the inside, the mechanism, the timing, and the stunt. The risk is voluntary and performative. The greatest danger for a magician was never the trick itself. It was always what society thought the trick meant.